measuring device. I mean, all of the manufacturers that we made them for, we subcontracted.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's try that again. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Good morning. As you may know, Christian Escobar, our chairman, is out of the country. And so it's my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce today's speaker. And welcome to the April 2023 Coronado Roundtable. Before we do anything else, would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. We do have a special program today. I hope you've all had a chance to get a cup of delicious coffee from Lyman. Lyman, thank you for putting that together and setting us up today. As you probably know, our programs are recorded by live Zoom feed. For those at home, please mute your microphone and turn your camera off. You may use your chat box during the question and answer session or beforehand and feed your questions in that way. Our technician Selena will be happy to help you out. The program will be available to view later via YouTube, the library's YouTube channel. I would like to thank the library staff, in particular Selena Villalobos and Tara Davies, for recording our programs and helping us get set up. Those programs will be presented later on the library's Facebook page, as I said. Our next program will be on Friday, May 26th at 10 a.m. here in the Wynn Room, where we will feature a representative from the Salk Institute up in La Jolla, and they will be discussing a number of the very interesting projects they have going on at the Institute. Let me now introduce our guest speaker, Captain James Spitler, United States Coast Guard. Captain Spitler assumed command of the Coast Guard Sector San Diego in July of 2022. As sector commander and captain of the Port of San Diego, he is the senior Coast Guard officer in the Southwest region of the United States. He is responsible for leading maritime operations to ensure safety, security, law enforcement, and environmental protection from the U.S.-Mexico maritime border northward to Dana Point and east of the Colorado River and the inland navigable lakes of Arizona and southern areas of Utah and Nevada, so quite a large area to cover. Prior to working at Sector San Diego, he served as the Chief Domestic Operations Division Directorate of Operations, United States Northern Command at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. He's a 1997 graduate of the United States Coast Guard Academy and was also designated an aeronautical engineer in 2005. He has served, among other things, on U.S. Coast Guard vessels in Alaska as an engineering officer and instructor pilot at the Coast Guard's Aviation Training Center in Alabama, as a surveillance engineering branch chief in North Carolina, and as commander of the United States Coast Guard Air Station in Houston, Texas, during which his command saved more than 1,700 lives in response to Hurricane Harvey. So like most good Coast Guard officers, he's been all over the map. Captain Spitler is an accomplished aviator, having achieved pilot designations, and those of you who are in aviation will appreciate this, in the HU-25 Alpha Charlie and Delta, the HC-144 Alpha, the MH-65 Delta, and the MH-60 Tango airframes. He holds FAA certifications as an airline transport pilot, both fixed and rotary wing, a certified flight instructor in fixed wing, airframe and power plant mechanic, and many other qualifications. He is a distinguished graduate of the Naval War College and holds a Master of Science degree in Aeronautics and Astronautics from Purdue University, go Boilermakers, and a Master of Business Administration degree from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. He is also designated as a professional engineer in both Texas and North Carolina. His awards include the Defense Superior Service Medal, Coast Guard Meritorious Service Medals, and an Air Medal, as well as various other military decorations. He and his wife, Megan, have two daughters, Bree, 23, and Carrie, 20. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Captain Spitler.
Good morning, everybody. All right, it's my absolute pleasure and honor to be here today. Thank you to the board for inviting me. And like you said, this is it's been a wonderful career. So I've moved 12 times in 25 years, which didn't seem like a lot while it was happening. But when I look back on it, I'm thinking, man, that was a lot. My daughters, the first one was, she was a normal kid to where it was tough. The second one just got along with everybody. So she has friends everywhere, and it's a great experience for her. So this brief is going to be a little bit of history, and then it's going to cover what we do at the sector, some of the threats we face, and then human trafficking specifically. It's a little bit of a behind the curtain look, and then what happens after dark. So I don't know if y'all know, but San Diego is the largest Coast Guard city. It was designated in 2017, but our history goes way back before then with the original lighthouse in 1855. In 1935 is when we stood up the air station, and our aviator number 1 was actually the first commanding officer of that, and it remains in the same location just south of the airport there. We continued to change and adapt. The Coast Guard always will. We're a small organization. We're about the size of the New York Police Department for reference. And recruiting is tough right now. So we're challenged just like all the other services to get enough people in. I am a 3rd generation Coastie. I grew up saying I didn't want to be anything like my father. We literally had the same jobs sometimes. I did sit at the same desk one time. So. All right, so the Coast Guard, we're a very small service, like I said, with huge responsibilities and a very diverse portfolio of what we do. In fact, we do 10 of the 11 statutory missions here out of San Diego. The only one we don't do is ICE ops. I'm sure nobody's really upset about that one, but search and rescue, obviously, law enforcement, marine safety, environmental protection, living marine resources, defense operations, aids to navigation, port waterway, coastal security. We manage the maritime traffic system, and drug interdiction. All right, so there's about 400 people at sector to manage all of that. And that's not nearly enough. We do the best we can with what we have. If we had double the number of people, I could fully employ them. It's just the responsibilities we have and the tools we have available. But my people are highly trained. They're highly motivated. A little plug for the Coast Guard. Our mission happens every day, and it's saving lives, saving the environment, protecting the environment. So it's an easy sell. People really enjoy it. The culture is really good. Whereas you look at some defense departments and they train and they do a lot of training. We're actually out there doing it. So when you pick somebody up from the water and you put them in the boat or you put them in the back of the helicopter, that changes your lives as a rescuer. You know, you are now a different person. So it's an easy sell. All right, so here is a video for y'all. See if this plays. Well, okay. That was a recruiting video. It really pumped you up. Every time I watch that video, do you have any way to understand how to make this play? I don't know if you can help me or not. But we may not be able to figure it out. Normally, there's a play button. I'm just not seeing anything.
It's on the side of it.
Yeah. There it is. Thank you. Every time I watch that, I wish I could start over. I really do. I'm jealous of the people coming in right now. So to do all of that, we have two 33-foot small boats. We have two 45-foot small boats, and those are jet powered. The 33s have trips on them. We have 3 H-60 helicopters. I have a team that manages all the ATON in the area, all the aids to navigation. And I have a prevention department that goes out and does a lot of the oil spills and everything else. But on top of that, the hats they put in this position. So captain of the port, SAR mission coordinator, federal on scene coordinator, federal maritime security coordinator, officer in charge of marine inspections, sector commander, and air station CO, all at the same time. So My team is phenomenal. I couldn't do without them. Everywhere I go, if I'm meeting with the port, I bring a team of experts to keep me in line and keep the information correct. All right, so I don't know how many of y'all know, but that is what the maritime boundary line looks for us. So it makes it a very challenging and dynamic place, especially when the fog comes in, nighttime. It is extremely difficult to understand what's going on there. Sadly, we see swimmers pretty often here. I would say it's weekly, monthly, depending on the numbers. I've seen as high as 140 at a single time come across. And it's a challenge. There's strong rip currents. Obviously, you know, it's cold water. We've lost 12 that we know of since I've taken over 10 months ago. One of them, we had pictures. This was just a random one. We never even saw him swim around, but it was a Russian national, a person of high interest, had his passport and everything in his pocket that washed up. So it's not necessarily people trying to find a better life. There's some nefarious activity going on around the border, and that's a struggle that we'll always have. All right, so this is the unclassed slide. We have another slide that has spaghetti strings going through of tracks that we know. We average 5+ law enforcement cases a night. Last night, I think we were close to 10. And we probably only detect 30 to 50% of them. So it is a significant challenge for us to know what's going on. I think when you grow up in normal society, you expect us to have visibility on everything that goes on out in the waters. If you ask me what were the last dozen boats that came into the port, I don't have the capability of telling you that. So it is a challenge for sure. So right now, the Baja, as y'all know, Tijuana is the murder capital of the world. It's been that way for the last 4 years. It is not slowing down. The Baja is really run by 3 cartels: Sinaloa, CJNG is Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and the Arellano Cartel. So they're kind of in the backdrop right now, but they have subcontractors. We call them the Amazon Prime drivers for cartel that does their dirty work right now. So they'll tell somebody, hey, we'll pay you this much if you do this. And there's plenty of these subcontracting. So we have transnational criminal organizations. Those are cartels. They operate over the border, and they have sub organizations now that work. And it's extremely difficult to follow them and actually find them. So when it comes to how do they do it, Panga's in the top. That is probably the most common that we are successfully in combating. You have wrecked vessels right below that. Significant challenge. They look exactly like everything we see out there all day long. We're getting better at picking up signs, small signs. One of the groups said that doesn't look like a Grady White, but it says Grady White on the sign, one of my small boat crews. And sure enough, it was full of migrants down below. Another one was, there's one guy on board that won't look at us, and he has an American flag. And when we got close, we could tell the American flag still had creases in it coming out the back. Down below, 20 people. You'll see the second one from the bottom there, which is we call single use. They'll take a pleasure craft, they'll just bolt an outboard on it, and they'll just leave those on the beach. The wrecked vessels will go back and forth. Sometimes they'll tow them across the border and then drive them up through the water. We have swimmers, obviously, which I talked about, which they just go around the point, and then jet skis. Jet skis that is our largest challenge right now. They are moving fast. They're doing 30+ knots in the middle of the night. They usually have 1 or 2 people and a driver, and they'll stop anywhere and throw people off. They coordinate very well. The cartel communicates extremely well. If we do a tactic and change the way we're attacking the problem, it works for about 2 days. And then they change it up, and we have to figure out where they change to. We've seen boats as big as 53 feet. Like, if y'all see the video in Mission Bay, the one that came up hard aground, and they had video in broad daylight and people just running from it, probably 30 to 50 people running from it. So, and the final threat that I'll offer is unmanned surface vessels. So we'll talk more about that later, but the remote control boats that are extremely difficult to detect. So NBL, there's a lot of stuff that comes up into Coronado. I think there were probably 3 cases last night where Border Patrol was chasing people around. That's not uncommon. It happens anywhere from IB all the way up to the Navy North Island. Typically, we have lots of sensors. Right at the border, Border Patrol has a handful of sensors that come down and do pretty good close to shore. But if they go around it, and by this point, they've all figured out how far they need to go based on the weather to go around. If they go around and come back up, then we have other sensors that try to find them. We have radars, we have cameras all along the shoreline, all the way through the AOR. But it is a constant challenge. This all happens in the Jayhawk, which I'll talk about a little more. So the quick route, we're talking minutes. So in the Caribbean, when they see drug smugglers, they have days. I mean, literally days to catch the people, go through the entire processes. For us, it's minutes from detection to notification of all of our team, a whole government response to them dropping the person off. Minutes. So it's a challenge. We are very good at what we do because we've had to find synergies and communicate well because of the conditions here, but it's still a significant challenge. You can see the close routes, those are mostly pangas. You get further out, and then the ones that go all the way out, those will be pangas, but they'll have 2 or 3 outboards on the back. They're shifting away from marijuana, so usually it's hard drugs, but they'll have mother ships 200 miles offshore, and it's a challenge that we're not able to combat right now. They've gone as far north as LALB, so they'll take that top boat with 2 outboards, and they'll go 100 miles offshore and just go north and just go around us. So it is a significant challenge. All right, human smuggling. So flow is apprehensions and getaways. In fiscal year 19, it was a 5-year high. In fiscal year 20, we doubled that. In 21, we pretty much doubled 20's numbers. In 22, it's continued to rise, and 23 is going to beat 22. There's no sign of this slowing. This isn't going to stop with enforcement. Migration challenges, whether it's a failed state, if we're talking about Haiti, it's policy that changes these. We are just trying to control the flow, pressurize the system, and try to find the bad actors in the process and hold them accountable. The USDA has been very helpful, whether when they've become very aggressive and rammed us and different things that they'll prosecute. But the vast majority we release, we give them to Border Patrol and they send them back south. So the TCOs or the cartels, they've become, we say, commodity agnostic. It used to be drugs. Money was in drugs. They could take drugs and it was a lot of marijuana. Obviously, marijuana being legal now, they don't do that as much. But fentanyl, and I'll talk a little more about that, fentanyl and meth are coming through at rates that nobody likes. But that's a challenge, and that's not going to stop with us. All right, drug smuggling. Like I said, most of the drugs, we don't see marijuana anymore, but most of the drugs are fentanyl and meth. It's a dense drug. It's small. It's easy to hide. And our drug busts have gone down significantly because of this. So in FY20, it was the highest year ever seizure of meth, and it was our first on record seizure of fentanyl. In 21, it was a significant downturn. We only seized 8,000 pounds of narcotics. In 22, we were down to 2,000 pounds. In 23, 750 pounds is all we've seized so far. The migrants have really taken over, from my opinion, from the cartel. So the way it works is the migrants will pay, or their family will pay, $18,000 to $20,000 for a guaranteed pass into the U.S. Once they get there, the cartels don't have to worry about them. They just go and they go into the safe house. So it's easy to move. But a lot of the loads are mixed loads. So those backpacks there, we stopped at Panga that had 14 people in it. Nobody saw anything strange. We arrested him. We didn't arrest him. We brought him to BP. BP processed him, pushed across the border. The next morning, the lifeguards showed up and there were 14 backpacks in the exact area filled with methane fentanyl. So that is a challenge that we're trying to get after. And again, it's a constant. We're just trying to really pressurize the system so they don't get to do whatever they want. All right. I think when we go back, let me go back one for the slide. Some of the reason why we're successful. The recom, which I'll talk about more, our partners. Human intel has decreased significantly with COVID. Prior to COVID, Border Patrol has the ability to have CIs, confidential informants that would provide them information. That information does not flow like it used to. I'm not sure why, but it doesn't. We know that the cartel is becoming more powerful. The Sport Fishing Association fleet told me there was an island south that they used to always go fish at. They had to pay $75 a head. They're no longer welcome there anymore. So somebody is paying the local government that money. I'm sure they're not just accepting they estimated it was $2 million a year, the $2 million gap. So the cartels are becoming more powerful. And it's going to continue to increase the flow of drugs and people. Let me give you couple more facts. So Imperial Valley Border Patrol. In 2021, they seized 80,000 fentanyl pills. You know, this is the drug that a grain of salt that size can kill a human being. They seized 80,000 pills. In 2022, they seized over 1 million pills. In 2023, they have already exceeded 2 million pills seized. And they would also offer they're not getting half the pills. Fentanyl is now the leading cause of death for humans age 18 to 49. It is an epidemic that I don't think we are talking about at the scale that we should be talking about it. They add it to almost every drug now. It creates such a great high that the drug users are going back to that dealer because they liked that high. And then occasionally they mess it up, they take too much, and the person just goes into a coma and passes away, as you know. Another interesting stat. In Vietnam, we lost 58,000 active duty. In 2022, we lost 70,000 Americans due to fentanyl. Yeah, crazy. I would have never guessed that. I had to go research it. I was like, that can't be true. That can't be right. It's right. Whether it was Washington Post or CDC, they all show the same numbers, very similar. All right, so really for the Coast Guard, we have a responsibility to interdict drugs, assist with migration, but it comes down to safety, life, and sea. That is my #1 priority. In the top left there, that was a boat with a cartel, the Amazon, the subcontractor, high on heroin, had about 33 migrants on board, put it into the surf, rolled it, everybody gets thrown in the water. Luckily, there were only 4 deaths, as sad as that can be. The cartels, they don't care about the people they transport. They just do not care. For them, it's a commodity. The bottom left, that was a panga that, again, approached the surf. And sometimes they'll drop the pangas. They'll just beach them. And other times they take them back and use them based on the conditions. That panga operator made all of his passengers jump into the surf. One of them didn't know how to swim. She died. The top 3, this was a really sad case. So the cartel member took them offshore and they were doing one of the mid routes. They were probably about 50 miles offshore. The engine died. He had a sat phone. He called his cartel buddies who came and picked him up, and they left the crew. So there are NGOs in Mexico that the families will go to if their family doesn't make it to the US and they don't have any communication with them for some period of time. So those NGOs started contacting the Coast Guard saying, hey, there's people missing. And we get this way too often. So we're trying to get all the information. As we're trying to get all this information, a mariner, I think it was a tanker, said, "Hey, I see a boat with people on it way out here." We put two and two together. We fly out there. That is what we saw. They said people had already died. It was 3 days into it. We hoisted about half of them who we thought were in the most danger and needed medical attention. It ended up being the women, children, and I think one male. CMAR, the Navy for Mexico, came out and grabbed the rest. But that happens, and there are times that we have no idea. I don't know how often it happens, but it happens for sure. The bottom right was another panga that came into the surf. And this is just a snapshot. Like, this happens way too often. Another panga came into the surf. It rolled over. 7 people were recovered. We did the investigation. We found 2 females that had drowned the next day, I believe. 2 or 3 days later, we found another person. We thought there were only 9. Now there are 10. So it's a significant challenge, and there are lots of lives lost trying to make this journey. I don't know if y'all saw me in the news a month or so ago when the pangas rolled over. So in the middle of the night, I'm actually on leave. My phone rings a lot, as you can imagine. I'm on leave so I can get some sleep. My phone rings, it rings again, and normally they don't call it. And it's my district calling saying, "Hey, there are at least 8 people that are dead on the beach north of you." So I get involved. I call my deputy, and this is all happening at like 2 a.m. "Hey, I'm going to take this one." So we start to figure out what happened. All of the lifeguards are on scene, Border Patrol's on scene, AMO is on scene, Coast Guard, we show up on scene. There's boats offshore, trying to figure out exactly what happened. The initial report are the two boats collided and there were 8 deaths. The result was the actual, through the investigation, was that one panga made it ashore, the other one rolled in the surf. Everybody in that panga, we believe, is deceased. One of the people that made it to shore called 911 and told them in Spanish, "Hey, there's people in the water, they need help." And that's how the process started. So at 9 a.m. or so, they call me and say, "Hey, we need you to do an interview." So you show up at the podium and there's a dozen cameras and all these reporters. And I give my spiel and I talk about, "Hey, look, there's a 771% increase. This is a tragic day for everybody. You know, this needs to stop. Safety, life at sea. The people who do this don't care about the cargo." I talked about transnational criminal organizations not caring specifically. The follow-on with that was not accepted by some portion of the state and the press. So they put an ad out here, an opinion section on me saying that I called the migrants transnational criminals, which I did not, and I refuted it. But it is a challenge for all of us, which goes into the same conversation, goes into, we call it SB 54, but it's the California Values Act, I think is what it's called. Anyways, I'll talk about that in a minute, but that's another challenge. So, and like I said, not all of these people are just trying to get a better life. There's a lot of human trafficking that is happening, and it's not necessarily sex trafficking. It's sometimes labor trafficking. Sometimes it's narco trafficking, which is what we're calling when they take people up to Northern California to have them work in the fields. That's if they can't pay their 20 grand, or sometimes they'll change the fee. I mean, these are criminals. Sometimes when you show up, they're like, "Hey, it's 25 now," or "It's 30. So they end up going into becoming essentially indentured servants. We don't know the percent. We just know that it's happening. And honestly, my goal is to get that funneled correctly. So my fear is that it's happening all too often. So what we do is we hand everybody over to Border Patrol. Border Patrol right now is they're completely overwhelmed. They don't have the ability to do interviews. They don't always do biometric processing. They put people on a bus and they send them back to the border, or they release them into the US, depending on their nationality. So another story, I'm sleeping, before I even get there, I'm one of the luckiest coasties in the Coast Guard. I live down by New Point Loma Lighthouse in one of those 3 Coast Guard homes. Beautiful, the best house I'll ever live in, hands down. So I'm sleeping there, the windows are open. Again, it's probably 2 a.m. and I wake up and I hear a noise, and I'm like, is that a jet ski? You know, did I dream that? What exactly was that? Like, I think a jet ski ran to the cliff. So I grab a flashlight, I go outside, I look over my backyard. I don't see anything. I go to the next house toward the lighthouse, and I look over, and there's 4 people walking toward the cliff, and I see a panga, that other boat, floating there. And there's no cell service down there. So now I'm like, I try to call my phone. I got to run back to the house, call everybody. People come in, you know, there's probably 30 cars there within 15 minutes. We're all searching for them, trying to find, you know, what exactly happened. How many there were? I only saw 4. We see footprints going down the beach. We find 2 females. The other 2 guys, we never found them. I assumed they continued. I mean, it's a tough area to get away from. But as the day starts happening and people start rolling in, there's a fair amount of cars there. So the 2 females, when Border Patrol interviewed them, and I was standing there, one was from Guatemala, one was from El Salvador. Hey, do you have family in the States? No. How much did it cost? I don't know. Where were you going to go? We were going to meet a person in Sunset Cliffs with a red hat. That person was going to take us to LALB for work. So to me, personally, I feel that they were being trafficked and I could not get them out of this ring. So we push them back to BP. BP doesn't have the capabilities because they are slammed. They go back to the border, go back to the cartel again. Border Patrol tells us that on average, it's about 3 times when people sign up for the $20,000 trip or maybe the human trafficking trip before they make it. They can tell that by bank accounts that are being used in Mexico, and then all of a sudden the money is coming out of that same account in LA or wherever through California or through the US. So my goal is to fix that process and try to get resources to achieve that. All right, this is maybe the scariest, not the saddest, but the scariest threat we have here. So you can see the dates there. So we found 4 since 2018. They're about 3.5, 4 feet long. They fit inside a trunk of a vehicle, so they're easily concealable. Low freeboard. When these things are in the water, you can see it down there in the center. It's an inch or 2. Through testing ones we've found, they have a range of about 70 nautical miles. So they can go quite a ways. They have a payload capacity about 80 to 90 pounds, depending on which one it is up there. And they only cost, we're estimating, $500 to $700 to make. So we worked closely with NIWC, SDSU, an organization called Hacking for Defense, Rice University. And we believe that this was a progression of testing. Only one of them, the final one, tested positive for meth. All the others did not. One was stuck in seaweed. Let's see, I think the first one, a Good Samaritan found it on the beach in Ensenadas. The second one was a person that the district attorney was getting ready to prosecute, and he said, hey, I can give you information on USVs if you cut me a deal. So that's how that one showed up. The third one, we actually saw the bottom right picture. So in my Jayhawk, which I'll talk about, that is what the camera operator saw. That is it. So the person was on their game, they're looking at it. What is that? And we don't have this as a real threat right now. They follow it, it goes to a beach. There's 2 people on a beach with phones looking at their phones. And he's like, hey, it looks like it's going to these 2 people. So we call our partners, Border Patrol starts rolling in. They control this thing up to them and they pick it up and they start walking, and we have this on camera, and they throw it in a whole bunch of rocks off to the side. They continue walking, but we weren't able to connect all the dots right then. And both of those people were released. So we don't know exactly what they were doing. We weren't able to interview them specifically. But those are probably test runs. And after March of 21, they probably became good enough that we haven't detected a single one. So the Navy has concerns about somebody putting explosives in there and coming in to the port. Coast Guard has the same concerns. They're a challenge. Navy's doing a lot of operations on semi-submersible and submersible unmanned vehicles. It is a threat to the nation, national security, and to frankly everybody in the port. All right, so this is a video, and you'll see a surfer off to the right, but I think this happens more when their timing is off or if we are offshore. So one of the challenges I have on my 87s, and we'll get assets down from up north to help support us, and I'll have boats out there all night, every night. We have people on the border, probably we call it a 2.0 or a 3.0. So we'll have 2 or 3 boats, vessels, aircraft out there searching. That if they see us, they'll loiter, and that messes up their timing, or they'll just go around us if they have enough fuel. So this was a daylight one. Yeah. So I mean, it is funny that we've just accepted that as normal. One of the challenge I talked about SB 54. So California Values Act, essentially the Sanctuary State Act, ensures that no state and local resources are used to assist federal immigration enforcement. So the challenge we have with that is most of our partners are fully aware that when they're audited, if they have done that, then they can lose funding for everything they need, and everybody's short on funding. So some of the organizations, state, county, city organizations their people understand this, so they'll go make a personal call on their own cell phone as a concerned citizen. We know we have reports of citizens calling up and saying exactly this. They'll call 911 and say, hey, we have people going on the beach. They'll ask, do you see drugs? No. Is there any safety of life at sea? No. Thank you. They hang up. They never notify the Coast Guard. So enforcement is a challenge because of that. I understand the regulation itself, but this creates a challenge for us. So I think there were 25 people in that one. So I mean, it's brazen. For a while, we were pulling every sailboat with its sail down over, and if the sail was down and everybody else was sailing, we need to go board that boat. And we had excellent. I mean, we probably busted 3 or 4 within a week, and then they changed their tactic. The cartels have endless amount of money. They have all the time to figure out what we're doing. They monitor us. We know that when we pull back in, if one of my 87s pull in, they're coming across the border because we have it on camera. So they have people watching us from everywhere from the IB Pier into Point Loma. It's just easier for them if they know exactly where we are.
Are they monitoring radio bands as well?
They probably are. So we use a band called MCS that is really a DHS frequency. So we all talk on the same frequency, which is beneficial. And I'll talk about it here. But to think that they don't have that radio is probably foolish. An example, their capabilities. So when I was in Corpus Christi, we fought some of the same things. It was a little different, but we had video of them driving up a semi with a crane, craning off a UAV, an unmanned plane that was as big as the semi, opening the wings and taking off. And that was purely to monitor us. So the funding is significant. All right, so recon. So this was, I think, built here because of the need. The nation has realized that this is the gold standard of how we should be. DHS just released more direction and a little more clarity on how to manage this, but it's a regional coordinated mechanism. And it includes all the partners. If you are involved in anything on the maritime land and there's crossover between all of us and our authorities, we come together and we all communicate and on the same frequencies, at the same location. And here we do it at the Jayhawk. It's the Joint Harbor Operations Center. It's the upper deck of the building. If you drive by the base and look all the way in the back, it's the upper deck up there. They have all the cameras, the radars going on, sensor operators, Border Patrol is up there 24/7. The Port of San Diego is up there 24/7. And they probably have the most cameras. We have radars that the Navy uses, all different cameras. Part of our challenge in DHS is we don't have a single backbone or architecture for maritime domain awareness. Everybody's trying to get it after at their own way with their own money. Eventually, we need to all come to one solution and put it on one site and integrate it. We need to use AI. We don't use that very well. Border Patrol is just get into it, and it's working pretty good for them. We also have the National Guard up there. But we use those cameras. It's not purely for law enforcement, for search and rescue. Sadly, bridge jumpers, which happens way too often. I think our numbers are probably around a dozen so far this year, which I had no idea. Coronado Bridge had big numbers. Last year was even higher. So, here's a video of recom in action. So let me set the stage. So a Border Patrol agent was, and this is a surf cam, was looking at the surf cam to see where he wanted to go surf today. And he sees this. So he immediately calls the Jayhawk and activates the recom. Let's see if we can get to play here. It is not one to play. So what you would see is you see this panga come in. It comes into right under the brake there. They drop 10 people off, it disappears a little bit, and then it starts heading back out. The next part of the video is a C-27. So one of our aircraft, which is stationed up in Sacramento, is down here doing patrols. The C-27 is tracking it and going out, and they have no idea the fixed wing aircraft is there, but he's going back out. Then they call in. We had 287s at the time. You see two Coast Guard cutters come in, the person stops. They put their small boats out, and we ended up arresting, or not arresting, but we ended up taking that person to Border Patrol. AMO was involved with another boat. So it was a good example and kind of a good show of all the assets in the area coming together, doing great things. All the, at the same time, Border Patrol was sent to the location on land, and they actually apprehended the 10 people there.
Yeah, it's AMO.
Air Marine Operations, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, apologize for the acronyms. As you know, Coast Guard and Department of Defense, we use way too many. All right, so to try to change, our admiral, our commandant tells us tomorrow is different. Tomorrow looks different, and so will we. And that really resonates at every level on, whether it's recruiting or whether it is attacking the threat. So one way that we are trying to get after this is through the Southern California Maritime Domain Awareness Innovation Cell. So what we tell companies is, hey, look, we don't have any acquisition authority here, but you can come and test whatever you want, and we will give you feedback on how it works. And the great thing on that is we have more intel and we have more information while that happens. So and back to the awareness gap. So what we know really well, we probably know about this area. So when you get beyond that, the information gets spotty, and it's tough. Those who are mariners know that it's tough to pick up small targets in weather. It's tough to get visual on those targets, even if you do pick them up. It just takes a lot of resources. So we have the sail drone. That's one of the newer ones, that orange fin. I think there's 4 of those out there right now floating around. So they can control those. They can put all different types of sensors on them. and report back. We're trying to refine that, but they're expensive. Obviously, UAVs, drones, we're using at very low levels. They're putting a radar up on San Clemente, which will be a huge help. Border Patrol is funding that. That'll give us more visibility. All right, so this is kind of the whole of government. The Coast Guard takes a lot of pride in serving the community that they serve in, and San Diego is special. We are, and I'm not sure if it's the military background of San Diego and Coronado, or if it is just that we are integrated in everything we do. When mariners go out, they fully understand that if they get in trouble, we're their #1 priority. Environmental protection is a huge concern for us. I am very aggressive when it comes to that. I am putting out fines that are really, it's shocking a lot of the Coast Guard, whether it's illegal charter, oil spills, expired COIs, drugs on board, deaths on board. I am fining people in 6 figures the first time they do something wrong, when they negligently do it wrong. If they accidentally get themselves in a position that they didn't want to be in, Coast Guard understands. Everybody is human, but when you have a history of not following the rules and you continue to cover the escape hatch or have electrical hazards, we are putting the screws to them. So trust that we're there trying to make it a better place for everybody and a safer place. So thank you for having me today. This is our final screen here. We can get it to go. There we go. Instagram, Facebook, recruiting. We are in need of people. If you know somebody that is interested in joining the military service, if you know of parents that have teenagers, or actually it's age 18 to 42, we allow enlistment now. So we've opened the aperture a lot to try to get more bodies. So anybody in that age range is interested in joining, we are hiring. So thank you.
Let's go ahead and take 5. Charge your cups, bio breaks, whatever necessary. We'll come back at 5 of, and we'll do some Q&A.
Thanks.
Testing, testing. Can you hear? Testing, testing.
I have a question. Yeah, I'll come to you first. Okay.
It's all yours.
When you start,
What's that mean?
I'm ready. When you start, make it count.
Jim Kelly first, then you. Yeah, Jim's your partner.
Pardon?
Jim's your partner.
Yeah. I wish I was smart as him. He's such a good writer. Well. My comment is gonna be explained. So why not get partnering? I mean, before that, like, no, because he did.
Okay, if everybody could be seated, we're going to start the Q&A. And we have Kirk Henry up here. He's trying to be president again.
I have a question from you whenever you're ready, whenever.
Okay.
All right.
All right. First question is from Jim Kelly.
Excuse me for not rising. This is not really under your bailiwick, but we're a three-ocean Navy now. And the Arctic is melting. More of the waters are open now. It's going to assume increasing importance, I think, in commerce and everything else. I understand that we have one working icebreaker. And by my count, the Russians have something like 3 dozen with more on the way. And even the Chinese, who don't even have an Arctic coastline. Do you have any insight or thoughts on what we're going to do about the icebreaker issue here? Are we going to build them? Are you going to build them, or is the Navy going to build them? Or would they get built at all?
No, it's a good
If they
question.
get built.
And please, when you ask questions, don't feel like you need to stand. So I was in Northcom for 2 years, so this information may be slightly dated. We have one heavy icebreaker and we have one medium icebreaker. We have one through our acquisitions process that has begun. And I think the latest date for production of this is a heavy icebreaker is 2025, but I think that may be delayed. But that's one. The numbers I remember for Russia are 54, and I think about half a dozen were nuclear powered icebreakers. Significantly different. One of the challenges that we're going to face. So the United Nations Convention Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, if you've heard that term, freedom of navigation. You know, after World War II, the US and partners said, hey, we're not going to charge for people to navigate around the world. Going through the Arctic with the ice melting, Russia is now charging people. So they're changing the rules slightly. They're claiming that we're doing it there to break ice, but the ice isn't necessarily there anymore. So with that path, being able to put any kind of commerce through the Arctic, it will change the way we view the world, how close we're attached, not to mention the natural resources. The fish are moving significantly due to the decreased ice. So your question about who is going to build the icebreaker, right now it's the Coast Guard at a pace that's very slow. The Navy believes they can maintain maritime domain dominance through undersea. So they're not really charged, from what I saw 2 years ago, to go out and build very expensive ships. they think they can do it. Being a coastie, I have a slightly different perspective in that we need to partner with everybody and we need to be present. I offered my time in Northcom that we should have a joint interagency task force. We have it east, west, we have these all over the place, have one for Arctic. And we should bring everybody with their different capabilities and authorities up to that. And being present, it's kind of the broken windows theory back in New York, back in the day. Hey, if the police are present, people aren't going to break the window. If we're present, the bad actors probably aren't going to do as much. But if we're not, they're going to do whatever they want. So it's a challenge. It will continue to be a challenge.
Next question, Jerry Winter.
Thank you very much. It's been a great presentation, Captain. My first one is just a comment about the Coast Guard San Diego emblem that you have up there, because you have San Diego as an upside down city, and we're glad to see that the Coast Guard recognizes that. There's people across the bay there can't be trusted. Anyway, you talk about recruitment, and what kind of recruitment do you do? I have my granddaughter's engaged to a young lieutenant in the Coast Guard, and he's a marvelous kid. But anyway, what are you doing these days for recruitment, and how tough is it for your recruiting?
So it's a huge challenge for all of the organizations. I think the Marine Corps was the only one that met their numbers last year. When you look at society, I think the number is like 20% of society can even apply and be accepted based on medical, criminal record, whatever it is. So it's a small group of people that you're going after. And then the desire to serve, I think, is different as the generations continue. You know, my father, who's in the Coast Guard, he wore a Coast Guard shirt and Coast Guard pants, and I probably just have a Coast Guard shirt. And the next generation, they have part-time jobs. And it's just a different view on what you want to do. So we really try to sell our core mission of a life-saving service. We protect the environment. We have a very good culture. My daughters, when they had the conversation of whether they want to go to the medical field or one of the militaries, I really appreciated the culture of the Coast Guard and then the Air Force. Those are my two. Everybody's a little different. Everybody likes a different mission. So it's a challenge. We're about 10% short. So out of 40,000 people, we're about 4,000 people short. We continue to bring on new resources, new assets, which increases the demand for people. And the gaps between the lines are continuing to grow.
Next question back here.
I got a lot more questions.
Right.
I understand during World War II, they created tanks out of wood and positioned them in certain places to make the Germans believe we had a stronger force. Can you create pseudo boats and put them out there with a little bit of electronics and make these people believe maybe there's a bigger surveillance group out there?
So I think those tactics work once. They eventually figure out that it's a blow up tank or a wooden tank, and then they look at it differently, or they use different sensors to figure out what's going on. For us, I think that a little sailboat with sensors that can communicate, that stays out there 365. If we had something like that, and a virtual fence that at least notifies me of what crosses the border northbound, or cameras that go and look into the port and read off the CF numbers and run it through a database and then notify us. That's the kind of technology I think is probably the right answer for the nation.
Next question, Fred.
Yes, I'm kind of curious, when people do successfully cross the border and integrate into the United States, where do they go? Where do they live? How do they make a living? I know some of it's drugs and
Right.
things, but it'd be kind of interesting to hear your comments on that.
So right now with Title 42, and Title 42 is going away May 5th, I believe. CDC is going to get rid of it. Under the current situation, and I'm generalizing here, there are exceptions to what I'm about to say, but if you are a Mexican, we push you back across the border for you to try again. If you're other than Mexican, you can claim asylum. And the way the Border Patrol is handling it right now is when you get to the gate, and mind you, the cartel controls 100% of people who cross the gate or cut the fence and get through it. And the rules on the Border Patrol, they're not allowed to make new fences. They can only repair the current fence. They repair it and they cut it. They repair it, they cut it. That's the challenge. So when people show up along the land border, it's probably 90+% other than Mexican. So it's very few Mexicans coming across the land. The maritime is probably flipped. It's probably 90-10 the other ways. Most of the Mexicans and 10% of the other. That other is what I'm worried about being human trafficked. Because if you're Guatemalan or El Salvadorian and you come across the land border, when you turn yourself into Border Patrol, they give you an ID card. They give you 2 weeks. This is through the state and federal. They give you 2 weeks hotel in the California area. They give you a bus pass to wherever you want to go in the US. They give you an iPhone, occasionally Samsung, I'm told, that will be paid for until your court date. And your court date is now 5 to 7 years out.
Jeez.
And they let you go. And they are doing that in the thousands, like thousands. So if you come across the maritime, we give them to Border Patrol and they do the same thing. That's the challenge. So if you're other than Mexican, you're motivated to go across land, turn yourself in.
Next question, Diane.
So if we see a ponga or a small, very small pleasure boat off the coast of the Coronado Cays,
Yes.
who do we call? I mean, I know we call the Coast Guard, but I don't have a number for that.
So if you're on a VHF radio channel 16 and just say, this is what I see, you don't even have to say who you are. You can do it anonymously. If you're on the land, you have a cell phone. If you just type in Coast Guard San Diego, the number that pops up will be the number you need to call.
Next question in the back or the side. Myra, let me give you the mic.
Myra Durbin. I'm concerned about loss of life for the Coast Guard. Are they being targeted? Are your men being targeted? Are you women?
So we've gone through right now, I call it a gentleman's war in that they don't shoot at us and we don't shoot at them. So there's a little bit of that. They have become more aggressive. There was a shootout in the Caribbean with Border Patrol. There was a Coast Guard person that killed somebody in self-defense in the last year in the Caribbean. We've had 2 rammings here, whereas they're getting away, they don't know what to do, so they ram our boat. Both of those are prosecuted by the federal attorney, so we're very appreciative of that. So they have become more aggressive. When it comes to in town, when I lived in Corpus Christi, we were told, hey, if you go to McAllen, you're not allowed to be in uniform because they were tracking us. We know they track our boat movements. We know they're aware of who we are, but I think they understand that if they were to attack me, Big Coast Guard is going to figure it out. And then now it changes the game for them.
They know who you are and where you live.
Yes, for sure. So like when that boat ran aground, the story of the 2 women we found right next to my house, all traffic northbound, all pangas stopped 100% for like 3 days. 0. It went from 10 at night to 0 once that happened. I don't know if they were waiting to see what my reaction was, or if the cartel was giving more guidance to their people and they said, I'll stop. Here's the new guidance. I don't know.
Next question, Kate.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Who in their right mind would want to use fentanyl?
So I don't think most people know that they're using fentanyl. I mean, they'll put it in marijuana. They'll mix it with heroin. Like we now have a drug here called Trank, and it's coming to California. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this new drug. It is the zombie drug. So they take fentanyl and then they put horse tranquilizer with it. And the effect is it turns people into what look like zombies. They can't really talk. They can only do basic bodily functions. They only want their next high, and it's super cheap. And they end up with holes of rotting flesh where you can see bone, and they walk around like that. So if you type Trank, T-R-A-N-Q, you'll see stuff you don't really want to see. But it's another drug that's prevalent. So I think the kids go back because they had a really good high. I think it feels like, I'm told it feels like you slept for a week straight.
The next question, believe it or not, is from Dick Tracy.
These unmanned, small unmanned boats that you were talking about, it sounded like you were worried about the terrorist threat, but wouldn't it be more drugs that they're bringing?
Over land or the maritime?
Yeah, the unmanned
the
service
unmanned boats.
vehicles, I think you call the boats.
Yeah, so they are, it's mostly drugs, I believe. We just don't know. We haven't found any, but we're worried about IEDs, as in them putting a bomb on it, bringing it up to an aircraft carrier and exploding it. That would be the terrorism of it.
Okay, back to Jim Kelly, where I started.
I understand the Title 42 procedure is expiring and they're expecting a surge. Is there anything you can share with us with regard to our preparation for that?
So I don't know how it's really going to play out. I don't think anybody really does. They believe the cartels will send people in to figure out what words they can use, how efficient it is. There's one argument that believes the border will be so backed up that they'll start using the maritime more because they don't want to wait in line. There's others that say the maritime will go to near zero because they can all come across the border now. Border Patrol's putting up large, like white tents. They're under a lot of pressure. They're under a lot of pressure to take care of the people, as they should be. They're doing their best, but they're undermanned dramatically for what's happening down there. I think the San Diego facility can take about 2,000 people in processing, and they are always over 2,000. And now other sectors are so overloaded, they're flying people down to San Diego, even though they're already over capacity. So it's a challenge.
Back to Jerry Winter.
Thank you again for a great presentation. Roughly, what is your budget for drug interdiction? And what could be done with that money if you could somehow stop the inflow or, incarcerate people in the United States so they don't buy drugs? But I mean, how much good would that do, say, in your budget if you didn't have to interdict these drugs anymore?
So I would say we wouldn't save any money. It's all I would consider a sunk cost, in that we would just shift priorities. So I would put more toward living marine resources. I would go out and monitor that mission more, or I would practice with the Navy more, or I would do more port, waterways, coastal security missions. We just don't do those as often as we need to. I would spend more time inspecting containers that come into the port, more time inspecting passenger vessels and commercial fishing vessels. We do our required inspections, but we do them to a minimum level because we have so many priorities.
Back to Kate.
I'm wondering about the monies the folks have to pay the cartel to transport them to the United States. I mean, they're coming for a job and working in the fields.
Yes.
Where do they get the 20,000?
So if they're going to be indentured servants, or if they're going to be human trafficked, they're not paying. They're getting a free ride, and they become somebody's slave for some period of time or forever. I don't know. Otherwise, it's mostly families, either in Mexico or in the US, that are funding it. And it's paid on arrival. So the cartel, the Amazon Prime drivers will drop them off the beach. They'll get into a van. That van now has full control of these people, whether it's they have their passports or they have them by gunpoint. I don't know, but they'll take them to a safe house and hold them there until the money shows up and they say, okay, you can release them.
One quick question. It has to do with
One quick question. It has to do with the name of the icebreaker.
Yes.
I know you have different classes, and the
Yeah.
icebreaker class has what kind of names?
So we have the polar breakers. We have the Sea and Star. Those are our heavy, and the Healy is our medium. The newest one, I don't know, they may have named it. It's going to be called a Polar Security Cutter is what we've named it. And I don't know if it has a name yet.
Back to Mr. Tracy.
I spent a lot of time looking over the north part of the bay, too much time actually, and your Coast Guard station there. And there's seems like in the wintertime, one of your cutters, the small ones maybe, is tied up there to a buoy in the middle of the channel. And what are they doing there? Do you know?
So if they are tied up, I would ask, what is the weather like? Because if it's really bad, yeah, this action doesn't happen a lot. So the OICs who are subunits of mine, for them to come back in and moor up with their crew, it's tougher for them to focus on training or whatever they need to get done. So they'll just stay in the boat and they'll get whatever they need to get done. And hopefully the weather, they get underway faster when they're not plugged in. So they're making the choice to go there. I'm not directing them to go there. And it's typically when the weather is bad and they have stuff they want to do, whether it's maintenance or training.
Dave Bean had to leave for an appointment early. So on behalf of Coronado Roundtable, Captain Spitler, this is a token of our appreciation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. I enjoyed it.